Incoming chat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome one more time to Incoming Chat, the podcast for by success, if I have to say it correctly. Today I have Erik Totten, which is not only a colleague, but also the editor of Success and a journalist and a crazy traveler, has crazy stories that we've been sharing lately. And we're going to learn more about him and content, which is a big deal right now. I mean, most companies are going deep into content strategy and how to use it properly. But enough about me. Erik, if you can let us know what you've been doing for the last couple of years.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Marcos. Nice to be here in the live chat studio.
Thank you.
So for the last 5 years, 4 of those years, 4 years ago, I moved to Poland. Before that, I was living in Omaha, Nebraska, and owned a magazine called Food and Spirits, which, as it sounds, it was about food and spirits, alcohol.
Favorite subjects.
Of course, easy to write about. So over those 4 years, though, when I started moving to Poland, I slowly started transitioning away from that business. Now it doesn't exist any longer other than a few events we put on. But of course, with the situation in the United States, events aren't happening this year. And so then over the last year, I've been working for Live Chat, working for Success as an editor and content specialist writer.
For the people that's listening right now and don't understand the job of the editor, especially in something that is so massive as online content, can you let us know a little bit what you do exactly? What's your day-to-day as an editor?
Yeah, mainly I'm looking over all the content that we publish. I'm checking our social media posts and copy for videos. As you know, we work together on that. So really it's kind of quality assurance, making sure that we're saying things the right way, that we're using, that we're following all the same rules, whether that's in writing, grammar, punctuation. But yeah, trying to make sure that not that everything has the same voice. All our writers have separate voices.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to go to. So, but you obviously you help the writers to maintain sort of a standard, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But how do you do it so you don't mess up their voices, so the people still have this unique tone when they write?
Yeah, I try to be very aware of that when I'm editing something. I don't want it to sound like I wrote it. Everybody has different unique ways of saying things, and so I try to make sure that, if I would write it one way, I try to make sure that that's not the basis for changing something. I just want it to be grammatically correct and have good punctuation and be easy on our readers.
So it looks professional.
Exactly.
That's one of the things that, and we talked about this before, that a lot of companies put out content that is embarrassing. And it hurts a lot their brand, mm-hmm, right? I mean, this is a huge correlation with like having this stuff that you can read and make sense, and it's also properly put, versus just like, all right, let's just rambling online.
Yeah, I mean, part of having content online is getting backlinks for that content, and no one's going to link to something that is full of errors. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't look professional at all.
Well, you're also a writer. I mean, you write for Success as well.
Of course.
When the writing process started, and we had this discussion with other colleagues, we always write to get the biggest amount of views we can, right? We want people to come and read this stuff.
That's the goal.
And there's this whole SEO process behind it. So we look for keywords and etc. But that sort of kills sometimes the value, right? Like how do you see this like SEO versus just putting something that is valuable for people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Bartek at Live Chat handles our SEO work, and I often will talk with him about my ideas and get him to look at things and tell me if something is, if a keyword is trending or, is more popular than something else. But there's ways that doesn't work too. When you're looking up something with SEO, you're seeing that it's popular right now. But what about trending topics? What about a topic that's going to become popular?
Like what about like if something's
in 2 weeks? And so, I think SEO is really, really important, but it's not the end all be all. I think you also have to be open to, we want something to go viral, right? Like we want an article that gets a lot of backlinks because it's providing unique information.
Yeah, and it's good for business. Just.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when you write, where do you get the inspiration? Like what? Because that's probably one of the hardest things for a writer to not only just find the right keywords and what people's talking about, but like how do you get inspired to write? Because you don't write 5 lines. It's not just a Facebook post.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It's a whole article, and some of your articles and some of our articles they're super long.
Mm-hmm,
they're well long read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most writers would tell you that coming up with topics is one of the most difficult things to do. I try to maintain kind of a backlog. I'm checking. I subscribe to a number of emails. I'm saving the ones that give me ideas. I'm reading news sites every day, and I'm bookmarking websites that give me ideas or articles that make me think about things. But really, being a writer, I try to consider myself, every man or every person. And it seems to me like, my name is Erik, but I've made the joke before that you can call me generic too.
That's actually a good one.
Because I've always, it seems to me that things that I find interesting, other people find interesting too. And so I try to be very much aware of what's appealing to me and why. And is there a bigger audience for that?
I guess you need a balance of writing stuff that you want to read versus stuff that people want to read.
Right. And if you're writing about something that's interesting to you, it's not such a job. It's not such hard work.
Exactly.
It's not tough to do the research. You're enjoying what you're learning. And then you're hoping, but I've been writing for 27 years, so it's not just hoping anymore. I take it as a matter of fact that stuff that I find interesting and engaging, it seems like other people do too. And so I trust that instinct.
And when you see your own content and the rest of the writer's content, right? Because I did a special not too long ago about how you fit different pieces of content with different missions, right? With different ideas. I mean, this is going to be for attracting people. This is going to be for converting people. Mm-hmm. How do you see the role of the content writer into figuring the things out? Like try to figure out what the customer wants behind.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it starts and stops with the writer. They're critical in that process. And I think, it's also working, like I said, with Bartek and SEO and really, coming up with solid ideas that we can see appeal to people. But then, as I mentioned, sometimes you just need to trust your writers to produce things that we can't see in SEO, but that could become very, very popular. And so, to me, it's, the writers are the end-all be-all in that process. And it's helpful to have people you can talk about your ideas with. Like a lot of times when I'm editing articles, the writers will put maybe a couple different headlines up there, or they're thinking about things different ways. And they'll ask me what I think of those headlines. Sometimes, there'll be a headline there and I will edit the whole article, and then I'll leave a note to the writer saying, you said you were going to tell me this in the headline, but you didn't. But you didn't. So maybe think about adding a couple more paragraphs, or...
So you're not a fan of clickbaits?
No, I'm not at all. No, I'm not at all. In fact, I try to make sure that nothing with a headline like that gets published at live chat.
And you started, and I don't want to call you old or anything, but you started you started writing for magazines, newspapers. I mean,
newspapers,
like stuff, like printed stuff, which a lot of our audience don't even know what it is. But do you see a huge difference between trying to edit and put, let's say, content for newspapers and magazines versus what we're doing online?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different. One of the main things that's different is, when I was writing in print, and especially with newspapers, because that's the nature of the business. But we were always on extreme deadlines, and once you hit that deadline, once you print, there's no going back. It's out there. Like there's no going.
You can't go and update.
You can't go correct something that you got wrong or fix something that you got wrong, and so it's out there for the world to see. So those deadlines were really stressful. Back then. A good thing that's different now is we can see what's happening with our articles. Like before, you published something and it was just like you hoped people were reading it. Maybe you were out at the bar one night and someone would say, "Oh, Erik, I read that article about the soccer game you covered. Really nice article." But other than that, now you
can see it in real
often
time.
Wondered if people were reading it. You hoped.
Yeah.
Now we know how many people. We know how long they spent reading that article. We know where they went after they read that article. And so that information is really helpful to have.
No, I mean, it's crazy how much access to data you have. The last episode we had Jacob Fidala talk. We're talking about data and how much data dictates the direction of your own content sometimes. And based on that, do you think companies should have an editorial line versus just writing what's popular? I mean, it's touching a little bit with SEO, but I see a lot of companies sticking to, we're just going to talk about this, and this is going to be our line versus whatever. I mean, if people's talking about that, let's just talk about that and change our tone if we need to. And
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have some editorial, like a mission, I guess is what I'm saying. And, that's something I really like about writing for live chat is that we have a lot of flexibility in the topics that we're choosing. We're not promoting live chat in our pieces. We're not, it doesn't read like we're trying to push you to go sign up for live chat. And then beyond that, we're writing about things that we know. And I think that is really helpful. Like, to write about things that we know makes it more engaging for us. I think it ends up delivering a better piece. And then we're writing about things that matter. Things that we can help business owners or leaders or marketers or content specialists or customer service specialists. We're writing about things that matter to those folks.
When you write something that you usually have knowledge behind, obviously. But that knowledge builds some credibility. When new content writers start, nobody will really listen to what they're saying because, like, come on, you just came out of uni and you're going to tell me that you know everything about AI or chatbots or whatever. Like, how do you build a credibility as a writer?
By doing it constantly. And then once you get to a certain point, the fact that you've been writing for so long gives you a decent amount of credibility. For me, coming up as a journalist, it was really helpful because as a journalist, you're trained to become an expert in 8 hours, a mini expert in 8 hours on a particular subject. And so you just dive right into it as hard as you can and really just dig deep. I've written, so many stories about different things that, like I remember, my first job, or not first job, but my first day working at the Berkeley Daily Planet, it was, writing like about straw bale homes. Like, I had no knowledge of straw bale homes. But in 8 hours, I knew quite a bit about them. And that, that was maybe 20 years. There wasn't as much information available online.
Yeah,
so you were still
you
calling.
literally had to go to a library.
And you're getting on the phone and calling the experts, like a journalist would. I think the next day it was writing about the possibility of the next upcoming Olympics coming to San Francisco. And so, just one thing and then a totally different thing. And then, who knows what the next day was. After a while, I think you learn how to learn a lot about something in a short period of time, and then you just want to keep capitalizing on that. Like, write about something similar the next time around so that you're still expanding your knowledge. And eventually, you become credible if you do it right. Like, use sources, say what those sources are.
Exactly.
Don't make it seem like,
I noted there are a lot of writers there that they totally pretend that they know everything about it, and that goes against it later on during. I mean, if people comes back and say no, that's not true. Do you think is a good idea to say, especially because after all, you're talking from a brand's perspective, right? You're still part of a brand.
Exactly.
Do you think it's good for content writers to specialize and take just one area, or is it better to sort of expand that into more? So having more general knowledge of everything, or
I think it's better to specialize for sure.
Specialize in
and that takes away a little of your freedom to choose a topic, but that's okay. I mean, if you're a specialist, say in AI, there's thousands of things to talk about in AI. If you're an e-commerce specialist, there's thousands of things you can talk about in those areas. I think it's definitely better to specialize because you really build up your knowledge in that particular area, and everything at a certain point will start to get easier as a writer because you know this information. You're not discovering it for the first time. You have a good background in what's happening in a particular sector, and that just makes it easier.
Now, when you write, you're talking to this sort of imaginary persona on the other side. You have a picture in your mind of who's going to be reading this most of the time. Do you have a process on like what tone do you want to use, or how do you want to address certain subjects? And trying to figure out that persona properly, or you just write the way you think is right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first rules of writing is to think of your audience first. Audience. And so, I have an idea of who is hopefully reading my pieces. I'm writing for them. I'm writing for them. I want to give them all the information they need on that subject, or whatever the article might be about. And so, I'm, and then from there, I'm just trying to build a solid article.
All right. But do you change your tone? For example, when you write for food and spirits, you want to write about a great whiskey, right? Do you use your own Erik's tone to talk about that, or you sort of adapt to like the way they will talk? There's a lot of write like you talk, and that's a comment I've seen everywhere lately. Write the way you talk. But if you have different customers, right? The person who's going to choose a good whiskey versus the person who's going to choose a great software for the company, or they're different people sometimes. So,
yeah, I mean, your language can change, like formal versus non-formal. I think that's probably the biggest thing is if you're talking to a CEO, maybe it's a little more formal language. If you're talking to a customer support specialist, maybe it's a little more informal. But generally, I think that advice, write like you talk. I mean, it's simplified, but that's good. It's good advice. One of the most difficult things for any writer to do is to develop your voice, like develop your own way of saying things that sounds like you were saying it, like you're having a conversation with someone. Because there's different levels of conversations too. If you're in a business meeting with a CEO, you're going to be more formal there too.
Yo, what's up, man?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, you want to adapt your voice to suit the audience, but you don't ever want to lose your voice. Like you want it to sound like, when Kuba writes something, to me, when I read it and I edit it, I can tell that it's Kuba. And I try to do the same thing in my writing. But I'm not always successful with that. Writers aren't always successful with that. It's a really hard thing to do to figure out the way you want to say it. The news article I think I did 2 weeks ago about trends in remote working and people getting bigger and not renewing their gym memberships.
Yeah.
I really wanted to have fun with that. And
I felt that one.
and to me, that's my voice that I want to portray, but I'm not always successful doing it. But I'd like to make a joke or two because I feel like that brings my audience closer to me and it's not such a chore to read. Because generally I think people do consider reading a chore. Like if they had an option, they would just have all that information downloaded into their brain. Like that's what they would choose to do. So if they're taking the time to read something, give them some rewards, not just the knowledge, but give them some rewards. Make it fun to read this.
Do you think entertainment is a big part of content? Because again, going back to what people are talking right now is there are two things that you should give value, but entertainment as well. I mean, you need to keep people having, I don't want to say like a good time or anything like woo, but you need to be a little bit entertaining, right?
I think a little bit, but really, I think what you're talking about is keeping people engaged.
Yeah.
And you can do that different ways. One is, like I said, is maybe making a joke or some popular culture reference that people know. But there's other ways you can do that too. Something I try to make sure our writers are always thinking about is, don't say maybe in your writing. Don't say something is kind of something. Tell people the way it is, because if people are making the effort to read your article, they're not reading it because they want to know maybe what it's like. They're reading it because they want to know about this subject and they want you to be definitive. And so that's not necessarily entertaining, but it's a good way to keep people engaged.
So looking back at everything you've seen on content, articles, journalism, do you still think that content has a huge role into marketing for companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to have such a huge role now more than ever, it seems like. And
actually, why? Because that's where I wanted to go. I was like, why now more than ever content is so important?
Because we're pushing so much content. Like I can't recall the exact numbers, but like every day we're almost publishing more content than like existed in the first 500 years of civilization. I can't recall that. Those facts are easy to find. But yeah, I mean, it's a content dense world. And so you've got to find a way to not only produce content, but get it out there in front of people. I mean, everybody that's producing content for a business is looking at SEO. So you've got to find ways like to stand out from that. And so, that gets back to what you were saying, entertaining. I think what we're doing at Live Chat is a really great way to approach content, have really well-written articles, but then combine it with an entertaining video host. We're still looking for one if anybody, just kidding, Marcos.
I'm fired.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's the future too. I mean, you're going to have to find ways to stand out in that crowd, and content is king.
And actually now I remember an article, or I'm not sure if it was an article or conversation that we had together about AI writing content. And yeah, content is going to be the future, right? Because we're giving people what they want to hear or what they need to hear. But what's happening with AI taking over, man? I mean, I'm truly concerned that suddenly my team of 10 writers that I love, they're going to be replaced by a small computer.
Well, I guess I would say first, don't be so concerned.
Right.
You know, my very first writing job was writing for my university's newspaper, and I was a sports writer back then. And I remember, and you know, and sports writing is pretty formulaic. I mean, once you've written 10 articles about a soccer match, you know, you can just plug and play with the scores.
You have a template.
Here you go. And so back then, like, there were rumors then that like there was, you know, an automatic sports writing bot or something that was going to take all our jobs. I haven't seen that happen. And you know, I think you're referring to the OpenAI source code that was developed by one of Musk's groups, and they've released like 4 or 5 iterations of that recently. And you know, like, I love to mess around with that stuff. I love, you know, putting in a sentence and seeing where it goes from there. And it is remarkable sometimes. It is remarkable. I mean, I can't remember what sentence I put in one time, but it made up like a fake engineer at Google with a name, gave him quotes about different things. I mean, it looked just right. But if you look closer, none of it made any sense. And so it's
like when I talk.
It's kind of like talking to a child with a really big vocabulary. Like, they can say all these big words, but they don't really know what it means, and they're not putting it into the right context. And that's where we're at now. And it's going to take a long time to, like the vocabulary is there, but where's the rationale?
And I mean, I guess the human touch, and it's going to sound super cliche, but the human touch is something that it cannot be replaced.
No, it can't. Well, you know, we're able to draw inferences and make connections that AI can't do. You know, where I think this AI writing is more concerning is when you think about fake news. You know, fake news doesn't need to be accurate. It doesn't need to totally make sense. Often it doesn't. And so I think, you know, using it for those purposes is maybe something that's more likely and really, really concerning.
I don't want to get too much into fake news because obvious reasons. But do you think the amount of content that we're putting out and the amount of sources that people find are playing a big role into the whole fake news idea?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, I guess because I was a newspaper writer, like, you know, whenever I read an article, you know, I'm looking at where it was written first, and then I'm looking at the writer. A lot of people aren't like that, unfortunately. You know, someone says something. That's right. Exactly. Like, they see it written down somewhere, and all of a sudden it's totally true. And they don't do any research behind that. They don't look further than that. And so, yeah, I mean, and that probably will not go away. I mean, that's probably...
I think it will take a...
Yeah, it's probably here to stay, because it's always been that way, you know? Like, I always thought it was, you know, sad, kind of funny, but sad that, you know, like, if you put something in a newspaper, it's a fact. People like considered it a fact. And now like, it seems like, you know, we're almost... we're going the other way with that. Like, now it's like the fake media. Like, you know, that the media has the time to be involved in all these conspiracies to get people to do different things, which, I mean, I've worked in newsrooms. They're not like that. Like, you're in a newsroom working because you love what you do and you feel passionate about what you do, because everybody working in a newsroom knows they could go make more in a marketing department.
Oh, yeah. We make a lot of money.
Oh, yeah, tons.
So from the content that is out there, what's your favorite company, or what's your favorite, writer company, whatever it's been calling your attention, like, wow, like that's good content out there?
Yeah, I really enjoy the Axios newsletter every day. To me, they're a really, really, really solid news organization. They're also on HBO with... Oh,
yeah. Well, I mean, they put an amazing interview not too long ago. Again, I don't want to go into that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I really like Axios a lot. It's where I get a lot of my ideas for writing, or just, my perspective. Understandably, as a new newsletter by, gosh, I really hope I get this right, Bill Murray. I really love that. Like, his perspective
It's not Bill Murray, the actor.
Not that Bill Murray.
Okay.
And gosh, maybe it's Bill Murphy. I'm not entirely sure, but it's really well written. He used to write for Inc. He's a former lawyer.
All right.
So that's where I get a lot of my sources. And then I like to read Inc.'s daily newsletter too.
And moving towards the end of our conversation, what will be, if you have to create, for a small company, you have to create a content strategy, super basic, it's just the beginning of it. What will be the first steps that you would recommend for a founder to start with?
Build a good team. Like, and having writers isn't enough. Like, have a strategy, have an editor. Something I've seen a lot of companies struggle with is they created a lot of content at the beginning, but they didn't take time to make sure that that content was properly edited. So you have mistakes in there. And over time, I think that really costs you. And so, make sure it's good in the beginning, and come up with a policy or a strategy and really just stick to it.
Let me double dip on that one. Just stick to it, right? Because a lot of companies will, all right, let's do content, 2 months, 3 months. Didn't work. Let's go back.
Didn't get the results. So let's do something different. No, purposely with content, you're relying on the new things you're producing, but more you're relying on building a backlog of good, solid content out there that is going to win over time. Some things go viral, of course. But I don't think that should be your goal when you're producing content, specifically writing. Like, of course, you'd like that to happen, but really you want to just produce solid content that are things people want to read, and then just build a backlog and have a huge library.
Cool, man. Like I think we can talk for hours about content, especially
Probably.
like the direction where it goes. One more thing, you are from Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
What will be your if you want to say something? Hopefully, we're going to catch some of those people in Omaha. So what would you say to them right now?
Wear a mask.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Everybody, please wear a mask. Erik, thank you for being in the show. Right now, music's going to come up.
Great.
And we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Marcos.
Incoming chat.